All of those things I just said. Follow the code of conduct. This is the retro for 117. SIG release meeting, December 16th, 2019.
But
Good morning, Tim.
I made coffee, but I haven't had it yet.
I made sure to get a red eye for today.
we have fun here.
Weird idea of fun. This man also likes karaoke.
So, retro.
Hi, Claire.
Hello. I am running into my company's office right now, and my phone won't let me open up the Google Doc because I don't apparently have the app for that. So if anyone can help by just reading the top topic on that part 2, by the time we get through discussing, I should be all set up to properly facilitate this.
So we've got Chris and Gwen with a +1 for clarity around timing of merging release notes on the actual release. This release was out of sync and required additional work to fix. This can be resolved by updating the docs to better detail the process.
I can speak to that briefly.
Oh, go for it, Gwen.
Oh, nope, go for it. Your issue, you read it up.
Oh, yeah, so we've actually taken action to resolve this now, so there's a PR we're working on to add that kind of clarity, but we found out that, the release notes need to be merged before we push the big green go button. So I don't think it was in your notes either, Gwen, and it seemed to be a thing we've learned for the first time, which was kind of fun. And unfortunately, it required a lot of work for Tim to fight the tide, as it were. So there may be other things that are, that aren't quite documented in terms of what order that they need to be performed in. So that's why I put that there, because there was a lot of extra effort that was required to fix that after the fact.
So for the record, the order was in my handbook, but apparently not yours. And it wasn't extremely obvious that this needed to happen and why.
Yeah, so we're updating. Stephen had a couple changes in our on the PR there to kind of pull it out and make it kind of big and clear that this needs to be happened at a specific time. So we avoid that hopefully in the next release.
I have a PR in progress on mostly the release handbook, and it might be useful to cross-link some of this.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. So it is. So I started reviewing your PR, Gwen, and Chris also has one open that include the changes. Or rather, yours says that this is, these are things that explicitly need to happen in order, and each step is entry criteria for the next one, which I really like that verbiage. So and then Chris has a note about it too, which is essentially super bold now. So I think we should be good there. All right, any questions on that one, or do we want to move to the next?
No, I just want to say thanks to Tim for getting that through. That was and Sasha as well for the work on that one. That was great.
Go team! All right, next one is Mr. Bobby Tables. There was some confusion between the docs and enhancements. Or do you want to say your thing if you're here? Do you want to do that?
It doesn't matter. You already started it. Go for it.
On who responds regarding issues, for example, being removed for not having docs placeholder PRs.
Yeah, this is mostly there is a couple pings back and forth between people on enhancements and people on docs, and like, okay, do I chime in and say that they should be kicked out of the milestone for this, or is that your responsibility? Just for, again, mostly missing the docs PRs.
So everyone on, or at least I feel, everyone on those issues that is part of the release team has that power. Right. Once the enhancement moves past enhancements freeze, kind of everyone holds that that issue in their hands, right? Because they've got to check it for docs deadlines or release notes or what have you. So I think anyone can do it. Whoever gets to it first can go for it.
That you do in the docs handbook.
Yes.
I'm not sure that our docs lead felt necessarily empowered to just like.
And I can see a benefit in having something stronger. The idea that anybody can't handle these is different than who must handle these. And if we have some clear owner, that could ensure that there's less confusion. But I don't know if that's something that should be solely on the enhancements lead either.
Yeah, I almost feel like once the release starts, once enhancements freeze is done, like not that their part is over, but like I think y'all recognized during the meetings that it was like, hey, our enhancements great. Towards the end of the cycle, it's kind of like, our enhancements green. It's like, yes, they're green because we settled that portion of the cycle. So I think it's it's something that where the ownership shifts to the entire team. It's kind of always in the entire team's hands, right? Because y'all have the power. But I feel like anyone can do that. But we should make it explicit.
I would like to posit that some of this confusion was enhanced because of opposite time zones between docs and enhancements leads.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally, it was one of the things that happened was that the docs team was very async in their communication, and so it was actually kind of hard to do a quick, hey, what about this check-in.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, no, there were definitely like async updates, and there was some, like, especially like close to the deadlines, where probably being able to actually chat more would have been better. Or chat more synchronously. There we go.
Yeah, is there anyone here from the docs team?
I was on the docs team, but I was a shadow.
Right, but this would have been something that it would have been kind of, yeah, you should feel empowered as a shadow to make some of these decisions in coordination with your lead. So if you have a lot of anyway, this is a different topic. So,
and also, like, I was mostly just reaching out to Domini to engage with docs.
Yeah.
So it could have, done more with reaching out to the group as a whole.
So would it be worth adding in like an Asia Pacific friendly time zone if we were in the situation again with a different, no matter what area of release team you're on, if there's some sort of time zone differential, maybe as it starts getting down to crunch time, it doesn't have to be APAC time friendly for the entire release cycle, but when it's down to this, crunch time, it might be a good idea to have that sync.
Yep. And I think that is an issue further down. So I was just mentioning it that this could actually just be what's that called when a symptom? There we go. This honestly could just be a symptom of a time zone shift.
Cool. Anything else for this item?
Do we think that we should, do we agree that working on better meeting coverage might help with this?
I think so, and being very clear and specifically saying if this gap exists, and then specifically saying towards the end of the release. I don't think it needs to be through the entire cycle unless somebody disagrees.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I would say, yeah, towards the end of the release, everyone who is, if you're a shadow, if you're a lead, like really, just to reiterate, feel empowered. Like this is literally part of your job to be able to say no to people towards the end of the cycle, whether we have to kick out issues or docs or release notes or enhancements, what have you. Like that is part of the gig. So.
And if your lead is not able to make a meeting, it is the lead's responsibility to send someone from their team.
Cool. Ready to move on to the next item then? All right, it looks like, Bob, that item is also yours, around numerous merge conflicts with docs dev 117 branch and master at the end of the cycle.
So I will actually defer to Jim to chime in on this one because he found the root cause of that.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. So we operate pretty much in the entire release cycle syncing master to a release branch. Typically, this is probably the easiest part of the release cycle because it's literally a copy, and we were even talking about maybe towards the end of the release cycle just cutting directly from master this new branch. What we ended up saying though is that the Chinese localization team were operating out of the release dash kind of the new future release branch. So when it came time to merge master to that release branch, which should be a one-to-one copy or just a fast forward essentially, created a ton of merge conflicts, essentially double the work of of what normally should have been done, or maybe I would say more than double the work that had to be done there. So the solution moving forward is kind of cutting out actually cutting out the localization teams from using a future release dash branch for their dev work. And when they're working on top of it, they won't be merging into the release branch. They'll be cutting a new branch, making their iterative changes, and then merging in as a milestone. And it'll make this whole problem go away. So it turned out to be a communication issue with the way Chinese localization was occurring. And I think we have a handle on fixing this moving forward. And then a side note on that, I'd really like to work with the release team in automating out a lot of the Git responsibility from docs, put that more on the release engineering tooling and try to find a solution there where docs can focus entirely on technical review, PR reviews, enhancements, getting in all the technical docs and not worrying about becoming a Git guru overnight.
Yeah, so we talked about this a little bit with the branch fast forward tool in the last release engineering meeting. I think that I guess that a few of the release engineers should probably become more familiar with the docs workflow to figure out how we can help out. Jim, as you are part of the release manager associate group as well, can you work to figure out what we can be helping out with outside of the branch fast forwards?
Yeah, absolutely. I really think that branch fast forward, it's going to be a lot of fast forwarding and merging and synchronizing those branches. So I think we solve it in one spot. It'll be good to kind of roll that into the other areas of SIGDocs. But I agree, and I'm from the release engineering meeting we had. I'm already taking ownership of this, and I already had a few open issues. I think Tim's done one of them for doing some more of the engineering side as part of the tooling of the release and patching and keeping more in sync that way. But yeah, I've got no problem owning that. I think the one issue that came up with using KREL is the ability to resolve conflicts. If you have an opinion between master and that release branch, might take some custom hacking on the tooling and trying to get it to work right. But I don't see why we couldn't use it at the end of the day.
Yeah. Okay. So we have. I know there's also an issue open for what's it called? Getting a fork for the release engineering group of Kubernetes, and probably I wonder if we can do it on website, or if we're going to need an additional fork or something of website to kind of basically. So the idea here would be to create end-to-end tests for the release engineering tooling, and then be able to blast the repo without fear of consequence in it being actual Kubernetes content. So Tim, this was the issue that you were tagged on, and you were like, "Wait, hold on." And then I think Sasha kind of rounded up what kind of the intent of that issue was. So that's open right now. Let me take it up and I can link it in here. But yeah, I think we're going to need a playground to do some of this too.
Hey, I'm Irvi. I'm Doc's Shadow. I have a concern about how we can sync the PR from the K8A's PR to the Docs PR, because currently when we decide to push down the KAP PR for the next release, then we still need to check whether the PR for the Docs is already pushed down to the next milestones or not. So this kind of like double task that maybe can be automated somehow.
I'm not sure I'm following entirely. Is this when something is on a milestone for the current release and gets moved to a new milestone?
Yes, and then we still need to check the docs PR, right? The placeholder PR that we are having. And I was wondering if it's possible to like sync between the docs PR and the PR for the Kubernetes itself. Maybe using label or something like that, so that when we decide to remove the milestone for the Kubernetes repository, then the docs PR for that specific feature is also being removed from the milestones.
Oh, the post cleanup action when something's booted out.
Yeah.
It's currently humans double checking.
So basically we'll be having more than 20 features tracking by the shadow. So it's like every day we need to be syncing up between the website and the code base of Kubernetes with features. Yeah, it would help definitely Doc's team.
This
One-
is a really good suggestion. I think it should be its own
Yeah.
point in the notes.
Yeah. So one possible thought there, if there is an open K website PR listed in the spreadsheet, it'd be essentially if it gets kicked over to the remove from milestone tab, you could get a list of all the docs PRs from there, and then you at least have something that should be a list of things that should be closed or removed.
Yeah, I was going to say that I worry about automating that bit too heavily. There is some value in having the human interaction. I do think that, like Bob was saying, if we get something that can at least give you a report, do a dump of what could be actionable. Yeah, but I worry a little bit about not having a human look over that and say, okay, this really should be removed. I do like the idea overall. Like, I want to make sure there's less work for y'all. Gwen?
If there were a way for this to be part of the process from the very beginning, right? We ask someone when they open a pull request against KK, hey, does this need docs? Is this a user-facing change? Does this need docs? Right? Anyway, I'm just thinking out loud here, but it's generally good practice that if you write code, you make docs to go with it. And in our case, the complication is we have a whole separate repo for the website that is separate from the monorepo of the code, right? But it's not an anti-pattern is all I'm saying to have the two be connected. Lots of projects block on, hey, you don't have code. I mean, we do too to a degree, we just don't do it in the same repo. Yeah,
and we do it in kind of a different way. There are plenty of things that we merge in for a milestone that isn't necessarily attached to an enhancement, which means it doesn't get the same level of rigor in terms of people tracking you down to do docs. So I think we should we hack open an issue and hack on ideas, kind of.
I think that would be good.
And one other input from my end would be Gwyn and Stephen. So whenever we go with the new enhancements tracking, so one other issue we face is that we go to each and every enhancement and ask them, does this need docs? Like the first question we ask is, does it need docs? So the enhancement owner come back in next 2 to 3 days and says me that, okay, it needs the docs. Then I will then I'll put a message saying that please open a PR against Kubernetes /website, so that it's taking more time. So whenever we put /milestone 1.18 or something like that, it should then and there ask, okay, when you're targeting to this release, does this needs a docs? And I should be able to see, okay, this needs a doc, so it is enhanced, like it is reducing my efforts of waiting for 48 hours just to know that it needs a docs or not. Maybe this kind of things might definitely help to know, yes, this needs a docs and we need to track it, rather waiting for 48 hours for the owner to get back to me.
So, do we? So I think like in the grand scheme of things, like how many places have you seen? All right, like what's the loose percentage of times that you have needed docs versus not needing docs? Because I want to say that should be like you should need docs for most of the enhancements.
Yes, so let's say out of 27, 26 for the last release, like we have seen like 4 to 5 or 2 to 3, something like that. Like very less. Like it's like 10 to 20% of them doesn't need docs.
Okay, that's my feeling too. So I'm wondering if do we need my initial thought when I was doing enhancements was like, do we need a label for all of these things that people need? Like needs kept, needs, like needs kept update, needs doc update, needs blah, 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 blah. Because these are like things that should be assumed. It does add friction at the front part of the process for enhancements, at least, figuring out resetting labels or, but I would assume if we said needs docs, then it always needs docs, unless it's even if you're moving from like beta to stable, right? You still have to say that your thing is graduating from beta to stable, right? From alpha to beta, you go like, okay, well this thing is on by default now, right? Depending on what kind of change it is. It could be valuable.
We have a needs release note, right?
We do. It's some of the configuration is tied to Kubernetes right now. The plugin configuration is tied to, like, not to say that we couldn't do this for the enhancements repo too, but just anything that can potentially change, because we're running into this right now with the issue triage ideas. Anything that can potentially change the contributor experience for a large swath of people needs to be carefully considered. So I think we should do an issue for this and make sure we expound on all those ideas before moving.
Cool. So it sounds like we have an action item there to open an issue and continue discussion in that issue.
Irvi and Vineet, can you work on that?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Cool. All right. Then for the sake of time, I'm going to say let's move on to the next item in the retro. We've got Jeremy Rickard, who I don't believe is on this call, but his item there were a few items that ended up missing code freeze and needed exceptions and last minute scrambles to include things in the milestone. I don't know if there's anyone I think this is from the enhancements area that would like to speak to this.
This is sort of, it's going to happen every release one way or another, and people will scramble at the last minute to do something. I don't know if there's really, much we could do to like truly prevent that from happening.
We already do like the code freeze, and then we do the real code freeze like roughly 12 hours after. Don't tell anyone.
Wait, no, seriously. Like the code is frozen now.
Wait, back up the recording. We're gonna
have to scrub that.
We'll remove it in post.
I mean, this is to give tests a pass, right? And I think this time the tests was so backed up that we enabled code freeze, and stuff was still stuck in the queue. So that could be fixed with better documentation.
The other thing is, I know with one of them, the metric stability one, there was just some confusion around that one. And that was mostly with the main person that was working on it was, I believe, based out of China. So there was just some turnaround time on getting questions back and forth and things like that on locking that one in.
So one of the suggestions that was made, and I don't know where it's documented, so I don't know if someone wants to document this, or maybe I can do it, is what if we brought back code slush and started the milestone restrictions ahead of code freeze? That would mean that people would be more on their toes because the bots wouldn't let them merge things. Thoughts?
Honestly, I didn't. Honestly, the only thing that would make me say, yeah, sure, is if there were data that there were fewer enhancements when we had code slush. I mean, enhancements exceptions.
Yeah, there's almost no guarantee
And I'm
that
pretty
that'll
sure this is the kind of thing that the exception process is there for.
Yeah.
I feel anecdotally like there's, like, this isn't data, but experientially, I think the number 2 frequently asked question after what is a SIG used to be what is code slush. So I don't know that it was understood or helping.
What if we don't bring it back? Or what if we do bring it back, but we don't call it code slush? Or it's just something that is an operation of some mechanism between the release team and the release engineering team. Sorry, go for it, Glenn.
I was like, does it need to be understood though?
Yeah, we just need to enforce. It's helpful if people understand why we're enforcing it. I think it's also helpful to understand why we got rid of it in the first place, and I forgot.
So we got rid of it because nobody understood it, and the merge requirements were so artificially different that it didn't seem like anything was happening. So there was no mechanism in slush other than a request to reviewers, approvers to be more diligent because we were in the final days ahead of freeze. So you're not frozen yet, but don't use the impending freeze as the signal to merge everything now so you can fix it later. And we were just asking for a week that people be more diligent and start dialing back on what they merged. And that's there's no way to enforce that across the hundreds of reviewer approvers.
Another idea is to pull code freeze up. If code freeze happens sooner, then people will start to do cherry picks, right? Sooner, right? Which means there's going to be more scrutiny around the things that get merged into the release branch.
That adds scrutiny. It also adds work.
Yes, but
I think the idea of this point was to add less work. Don't want to deal with extra enhancements, so pulling it up would actually make it worse from our perspective in terms of how much work we're doing. I see your point about the quality of code, however.
So yeah, this is tricky. What's the criteria that because the criteria that we base, I feel like the criteria that we base an exception during enhancements freeze and code freeze are a little different. So maybe it's valuable to provide more detail around that.
So I am pretty sure I granted all the requests for exceptions, and I think there were a total of 4. There were 2 enhancements exceptions and 2 code freeze exceptions. One of those was because there was confusion. The other one was because, wait, no, we are actually like really, really close. Please, can we get this in? And the SIG chairs were on board with it. I thought the process was working well. I looked back and I saw which exception had not been granted, and those were all things that were mostly the byproduct of someone not realizing that we were on a schedule and being like, oh, it looks like I can get an exception, but there was no work started, stuff like that. It's usually pretty obvious. And I believe that both the exceptions that I did grant made it as features. So again, I think this process works as it is. So
we did have 4 total exceptions. 3 were enhancements freeze exceptions, and then 1 was the code freeze. We thought we had 2, but it turns out that they just had to wait for tests to pass.
That was one.
Right, and we had some tests that were backed up, so we didn't blame people for that, if I recall correctly.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So are we happy to say that we don't need to do anything here, or is there a tweak somewhere?
I think at this time we're continue as we have been doing.
Okay. So real quick, can we just take a moment to say happy birthday, Veronica? That's it. That's all.
I would start singing.
Oh my God! Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Do we need to get everyone on 3?
It does not work well with Zoom.
We're going to be all out of sync, yeah.
Don't ask me how I know this. Happy birthday, Veronica.
Thank you. I couldn't unmute myself, and I was like, "Oh my God, where's the screen? Where's the button?" Yeah, exactly like that. Thank you so much.
Cool. Are we ready to then move on? I think the next item up from Gwen, time zone representation was good, but meeting times did not reflect this.
Yeah, the main action item that I would say for future releases going forward is gather information on what meeting times work for people in multiple ways. It is not enough to just schedule a meeting and then it is not enough to informally ask people in public, is this meeting time okay for you? Or let me know if it doesn't work, because people don't want to be the odd one out. And so that was on me, that I didn't take individual hesitation to go against the grain into account. And make a doodle, ask people, come up with a better plan. It is tied a little bit into, I believe there's an action item on what we will do differently about just restructuring the meeting times in general. And I should have done a better job here. I do think that moving the meeting time from 10 a.m. to 9, and I think that was the case in 116 as well, helped more people, but I don't think it was enough.
Cool.
Yeah.
So,
that's really it. I think this is going to be rolled into the better time zone representation.
One of the things I did in my cycle that was relatively painful for some, but also drove positive benefit for some, was we had that Monday meeting at the time, and then I also did a much earlier meeting on Tuesday. I think it was 6 a.m. my time or something like that, or 7 a.m. I don't know. It was much earlier to become notably before the end of day in Europe at least. And I think that's something that's unfair to require of the overall release lead. But if it's possible somewhere within the team to figure out how to have mirror meetings, and then the key is that somebody is in both to sort of notice trends and patterns and convey information between the two, whether it's the release lead or other leads or even shadows, but to get cross-pollination between them so that you don't end up with divergent subteams within the team. But it's something to consider, finding a way how to practice that.
So I think that this also happens post your cycle. There was, I can't remember who at the moment, but I think there might have been a lead shadow or two who held like a EMEA friendly meeting. So yeah, we should get it in docs. Yeah. Well, I think your docs in, sorry. No, your docs update includes some of that, Gwen, already.
Yeah, it does. I think we can be a little bit more clear on how leads should like use their shadows. That's a bad way to put that, but right, if everyone talks to their shadows and shadows live in a different time zone, run a meeting in that time zone, report back to their lead, that can also just help fill in some of those gaps. It'll be a little bit more brittle in terms of communication, maybe, but I think it'll get more people in the loop and have a better time.
Cool. Anything else on this card, or are we ready to move on?
Let's do it.
All right, Gwen, you also have the next one. Sharing a Zoom account was a challenge when SIG meeting was adjacent to the release team meeting.
Yeah, I kicked out the SIG meeting several times. And it was really hard. It was just hard to set up first thing on a Monday morning after dropping off my kid at school. And then I had to wait until 9 o'clock exactly. And then, so basically for the first several weeks, the meeting always started late and I was always scrambling for the key. It might be better to not have them adjacent. This is a personal pet request. I don't know.
That was frustrating for us. So I think part of what this came down to was we had a link where the link text showed the correct meeting ID, but the underlying link was the SIG release meeting. So it would cause everyone to have to wait for the host. And
that was part of it.
That was only part of it, but also I do not like Monday meetings. So I'm going to +1 this. We had a poll that went out, and I will be doing another poll for SIG release. We had a poll that went out, and somewhere between 50 plus of you voted for Monday meetings early, which I was very surprised about. So I set the meeting for Monday. But it sounds like it's not the greatest. It's less bad for me because I'm on the East Coast, but the West Coast is usually groggy pants during this meeting. So let's work on it for 118. We can move the meetings. It's totally fine. I'm going to caution. I don't want to get in the habit of going crazy with moving our meetings too much. So once we set this poll, please actually vote on the poll. The things that we will choose will be something that's useful for something that's convenient for the SIG chairs to be at, so we can actually record the meeting and moderate it. And second, it's going to be the top choice that people choose. Great. So please, when that poll comes out, do vote on the poll, because it is like we don't create them. We create the meetings based on everyone's feedback. So.
Thank you for running that poll, Stephen. Sorry, I didn't fill it out the first time.
Question for
the meeting ID though has nothing to do with the account, unfortunately. You can have a different meeting ID and still kick the other meeting out. That was the real problem. I was like, I have my own meeting link. What is even happening? But because it is the same Zoom account, it will end the other meeting first.
I think that was something that we were hacking on, or I think you, Tim, and I got in a Zoom or jumped on and off of Zooms and tried different things. So someone should document this. This sounds contribexy, that only one meeting can happen at a time, because this is probably useful information for everyone.
And it would be nice if instead of one host key for the account, if a meeting had a host key. Like if I think that would be part of it too. Like if the two were parallel, but if that's not possible on an account, then that drives us towards
that's a
two
Zoom
accounts.
thing.
That's a Zoom feature request. Yeah.
They have been pretty responsive on these things in the past, so we can work on bubbling that sort of thing up.
Yeah, I think it has something to do with how the Zoom is set up for everybody.
I know the CNCF also has this problem with some of their SIG groups where they literally went creating multiple SIG or multiple Zoom accounts just so they can have, like for the same group, even just so they can have the same meetings or meetings at the same time slot.
Cool. Anything else for this card, or do we feel ready to move on?
So I feel like the team that has the most sub-projects and meetings is Cluster Lifecycle. Have they been having trouble with this, or have they figured out a way to deal with it better?
We can go for it, Bob.
No, I was saying if they have not surfaced it to Contribex. Oh, they might be talking to George directly.
As far as I know, since I spent a good time stalking the cluster lifecycle meetings, they actually just manage this by organization. They are really strict about ending a meeting at a certain time for the next one to start.
Yeah, and as a person who runs a SIG cluster lifecycle meeting, like the first thing I had to do was make sure there were absolutely no conflicts anywhere near the meeting in the calendar before we set it. So that's part of it. Yeah, I think it's really just I guess it's being more organized with some of that stuff. But I think we have like so few conflicts that we can do it.
Cool. All right. Let's say for the sake of time, let's try to move on, since I think we might be able to get through all of these items in the what didn't go so well column today. So the next one is also from Gwen. The calendar and Google Group permission setup was very much not self-serve.
Yeah, I saw that a lot of this was addressed in the template, in the new onboarding template for release leads and release managers. So this may already be in the works for a fix, but I struggled having to. So it was just kind of this like, oh, I'm supposed to set up calendar permissions. What's the calendar called? Where do I find the calendar? Who's in charge of this calendar? Who do I talk to? Okay, it's the SIG leads. All right, they have to enable me. Okay, now I have to learn how to calendar correctly. All right, who's on the list? Should I make the list? How do I add the list? Anyway, it was just this whole, it was a little bit painful. So, and I didn't realize that, I also didn't realize that I was basically in charge of making the calendar list.
So that should have been part of your docs?
Yep, it was sort of, but it was very hand wavy and assumed that you already had calendar permissions.
Okay. Can you do me a favor and go over the release leads onboarding template? I did the template that I did was a quick pass, or like a first thought.
Yeah, that's part of my big PR. I added Zoom and calendar links as part of the, basically my doc said schedule a handover meeting with the previous lead and the SIG leads, and that never happened. And so I put it on the template, like
Okay.
the calendar weren't part of it. So I took that out of the handbook, basically put more bright flashers on, do the template, make sure this issue is filed for these permissions.
Yeah, and so part of the template was also like, because you naturally won't have permissions for some of these things. So by having the template and by having an issue open, it's assigned to someone who might, right? And they can go through the checklist and make. I would just be. Can you be explicit? I know it said like Zoom something and calendar requirements. Can you be super explicit about the calendars you need? And it's really just a release cal. So making sure that the person has access to it. I'm not sure if that's already on the template.
That's okay. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So just making sure we have the calendar link and release chairs have access to it. So.
One of the things that we tried to do, because I ran into these issues a year and a half ago, it seems like it's been an ongoing issue, but we tried to initially document this in a way that was deliberately just referring over to the contrib-x information on how to do this. But I think that what you're highlighting, Gwen, is that that was the wrong approach, because that's focused on SIG chairs and rare, where this is a regular occurrence and somebody who is not a SIG chair. So our part definitely should just be explicit on how you interact with the chair to get the things that the chair is able to grant.
I think the onboarding template is a really great solution.
I believe some of the contrib-x docs are now very much out of date after some of the changes that went through to the mailing list and calendar permissions this year.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're super out of date.
I think there is an open issue on fixing those.
Yes.
All right, y'all. We have about 10 minutes left in 2 items. Is there anything anyone is dying to say on this last topic? Otherwise, I will try to move us on to get through the last 2 items in this session. All right, I'll hear silences. That's cool. We can move on. Gwen, you also have the next one. Several SIGs not responsive to the point that enhancement slipped due to this.
This is a bit of, this is less of a release item and more of a SIG contrib-x item. I have opened an issue. I think I linked it. It will be escalated to steering if morale does not improve. Yeah. I have a couple of plans for part of this is just communicating what we expect, and part of the issue is also that not everything that goes into KK is necessarily tied to an enhancement, right? So it's not necessarily something that we as a team track, but I definitely came across a thing that was an enhancement, and somebody told me, oh, it's not tied to a milestone. We can just like, it's fine. We just do it whenever. And I'm just like, then why do you have an enhancement? I don't, it's so.
And also like completely blew off the.
Around. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and it also like the person that was actually working on that one too was, it pretty much completely, blows them off.
Yes, it was. But these are cultural attitudes in the project that I wrote down here for SIG contrib-x and steering to realize that this is an issue that the release team deals with. This is an issue that individual contributors deal with. This is an issue that a lot of people encounter, and it's not really for us to fix. So I don't, this is a no-op for us, I think.
What if I know that this doesn't solve everything, but what if the milestone was on all the time?
Yeah.
What does that give?
That forces milestone maintainers to be more attentive about the issues that are going in. So there is some ownership. I know you're making faces, and it's like it's a mechanism to move us towards enforcement. It doesn't necessarily get us.
I think as Gwen mentioned, this is about culture. If it's just another required label, people will simply add it to merge without thinking about any of the consequences that are the root discussion.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's people, process, tools, right? And there's a miss on the people side and the process side. I think we have all the tools to do what we need to do. So.
I have had, after I filed that issue, I have had SIG leads reach out to me with apologies for not getting back to me on things during the release cycle. I have also had, SIG chairs, I mean, sorry. I've also had chairs reach out to me saying, oh, there's a SIG chair mailing list. How do I get on there? I've had SIG chairs reach out to me saying there is a Slack channel for SIG chairs. I didn't realize this.
I can say, at least for the SIG chair mailing list, good, at least the ones that I also talked to were already on that mailing list.
Yeah, at some point Paris did and Contribex did a sweep of that mailing list to make sure that people were on it. There was also the chairs need to know email that was going out, and the people behind the community alias made sure to explicitly add everyone as like their individual email addresses instead of the group, because people weren't responding to the individual to the group mail. Like,
unless it was going directly to them, they were not opening it.
Yeah. So it's definitely a culture thing.
Yeah. And sort of more on the culture thing, like there is definitely that attitude. It's like, oh, it doesn't matter that it missed enhancements freeze or whatever, it missed code freeze. We'll just cherry picker it. It's no big deal.
Yeah. I will say that the patch release team, as an upside at least, the patch release team gets more and more ruthless by the day about what we will and won't allow into a patch release. So there is a bit of a buffer at the end of it. We won't approve things that look like features unless there is some crazy good reason. And even then, Tim has been our master gatekeeper for a bunch of cycles, just putting the ban hammer down on features that have been disguised as bugs sometimes. So I think that we have a bit of a safety valve at the patch release level, but we do need to make sure that, before it hits post.0, that there are some gates too.
All right, we are at the 5-minute mark for the retro. Is there anything left on this item folks are dying to speak to? If not, I'd like to try to get the last item in this section finished.
Let's do it.
All right, so Gwen, that's yours. Several times woke up on Monday morning to release engineering and release process decisions that were started on Saturday and finalized on Monday in an earlier time zone.
Yeah, mostly it said in my handbook up until the PRI opened that I should expect to work on weekends as a release lead. And while I want to make the choice of when you work free to everyone, hey, I work from home, I set my own hours. I don't like putting that wording into a handbook, and I don't like setting the example of working on a weekend, which is partially tied to my request to move the release meeting to a Tuesday. And also to Stephen's request to never release on a Monday, so that we can do the pre-staging on a Monday and then do the actual release cutting on a Tuesday.
So I would love if you have an opportunity to call out explicit things that we did, because like I sometimes poke around at things on the weekend or late nights. I don't make decisions on things though. So like if it's something that's waiting to merge, I may release it. But if it won't be a decision made without the group. So if there are explicit things in the process that have.
Yeah, there were PRs against SIG Release that I had meant to get to on Monday morning that I'd gotten assigned to over the end of the last week. I look at them on Monday morning and they're approved and merged. I'm like, that's great, but at the same time, maybe I wanted to.
So yeah, that's not meant to tell anyone to work on the weekend. Like if I have review time, I will sweep the repo, right? And it's usually reviewing content. So like that from my side, that's going to keep happening because that's when I have time to do it. But also like don't think that you have to be the person to approve it. Right, just because you get tagged for the approval.
That basically, I don't know. If somebody, I struggle with this a lot working on the West Coast, right? Because if somebody on the East Coast makes Monday morning their review time, that does mean I have to either wake up really early or start working on Sunday night if I want any input. So this might not be a release process related thing, but it's just somebody Friday afternoon and I don't get to it until my day starts and it's over and done. And I'm like, oh.
I think this is a broader cultural issue where our merge criteria are lax. We're biased towards merging things fast. I also see the same thing you're describing, Gwen, where there's a list of things that I want to read and think about and discuss, and unless I put a hold on them, they're going to disappear from my Kubernetes list. They're going to just merge, and the code velocity can be difficult to keep up with, and then you end up not being involved in decisions or discussions and not having even an understanding of what's in the repo anymore, being surprised when you go in to do something and being, when did this change happen? And go back and look at the Git history and, oh yeah, it was proposed and merged really quickly, efficiently good, but I would have liked to have been involved. And there we have to figure out how to balance merge fast and iterate versus global team understanding and shared understanding.
So yeah, so there's also so what I do personally, because I feel this too, especially like if we're dealing. So I deal with a lot of the release engineering people who are working on PRs in EMEA time, and then hoping to get things moving on maybe the test infra side or something on the West Coast time, right? So stuck in the middle. If I think there's something that I should explicitly review, I think a few of you have seen this. I put hold for my review on the PR, right? And that means at some point, like, this is something I feel maybe some feelings about and want to review it. And usually y'all will ping me and go like, hey, was there a reason you held this? Like, are we ready to go? And that will trigger someone going back and maybe me taking a quick sweep of this. Yes, this has been adequately reviewed. Okay, let's merge this in.
And I feel like to get at what Gwen's asking for, some of us individually would need bots that watch for new PRs Friday through Monday and automatically added hold to them.
That still means that I have to go into the repo on a Sunday night and add holds.
Well, I mean, let's. I understand what you're saying, but I don't think things are just flying in over the weekend. It's not happening during the weekend. It's like I think it's a symptom of like the release team lead having to deal with all the things, right? So like you're subscribed to all the things, you're looking at all the things. Think
the pre-staging of the release, while I liked it in general, being prepared and ready to hit the button midday on Monday, that was great, but it started on a Saturday. And I was around that weekend, right? I'm just worried of sending a signal that this is expected.
Yeah, so removing that from your handbook is part of it. And having it on the recording now twice. There's no expectation for people to work on nights and weekends. Please do not do that. Yeah, period.
All right, folks, we are about 2 minutes now over our regularly scheduled time for the SIG release meeting. So I want to let folks know if anyone needs to drop, don't feel like you have to be held captive on this call because it's going long. Please leave if you need to. For this item, are there still things folks want to say, or do we want to move on to figure out when we want to talk about what we will do differently in 118?
I leave that to Gwen to...
Yeah, let me go over some of these are on the back, were landed on the backlog for 117. Perhaps Jorge can speak to the test infra code freeze. Jorge, are you still on the call?
Yes, sorry. I just thought you were gonna say something else after that. So actually, in the issue that I put up in the notes, there is. I just resume every single conversation that was that was had and was related in any way to code freeze for test infra. The quick TLDR, which is a really big recommendation from the people working on test infra, is that a code freeze wouldn't actually be. They wouldn't recommend it. They wouldn't recommend a test freeze. Every single tool that we rely for CI, for testing everything, it is essentially deployed every single day, and holding changes for multiple weeks will possibly introduce really complex problems whenever the code freeze was over. That is one big point. The other big issue that they brought up is Kubernetes is only one consumer. There are multiple projects out there that rely on Boscos and all those components, and holding them hostage for our sake might not be the proper solution. And yeah, that is the TLDR.
So I don't think we framed this the right way to get the traction that we wanted. And also, this shouldn't be in the what will we do differently section. I think this is just a discussion. So I don't think we were ever implying that we should freeze all of test infra. We were saying that changes to the things that can affect a Kubernetes release should be considered strongly, right? Before making that change. If we cannot like distill that down to a few changes, what that could be, I don't think this would ever happen. But because you're right, there are more, like Kubernetes is not the only consumer of Frau. So asking them to freeze things, I would say like things like changing the release branch jobs. Please don't do that during code freeze, right? Gwen?
To me, this sounds like a general SIG release kind of discussion, right?
Yeah.
Not a release team goal.
Well, I mean, it would eventually be part of the. I mean, these are all SIG releasey things, but eventually it would be part of the release team process, right?
Sure.
But this is squishy. If someone is interested in doing this, make it tighter, right? Give them things that we don't want them doing, like changing release branch jobs, right? Like, right, I'm saying like tighten the scope of this. Don't say like don't make any changes in test infra, because that's not reasonable, right? Tighten the scope and say like these changes can affect our release process in the following ways. We would like to see if it's possible, and I think it's some of this is already possible. Release branch jobs are we're the owners for release branch jobs. A top level approver can still approve them, but we can that's something that's fixable-ish. Yeah, if we want that to happen, that needs to be tightened. That's all.
Will that actually be reasonable to for example, do a test infra? I don't know what to call it. I was using test infra very liberally, but a freeze on the release branch jobs, because if again an issue happens or something of the sort for whatever reason, for example, I don't know if this was this release or a couple of releases ago, the people from Cluster API that were working on the Google provider. Essentially,
Conformance stuff. Yeah.
they broke all of GCP, and that affected the testing infra in between quotes. If something of that sort happens, we could possibly be getting a different signal from just the release jobs as compared to as compared to everything else on test grid, and it will make it a little bit more complicated to actually be able to debug and come back to testing and ask for help.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, if we just continue with, and again, sorry for the buzzword, but it's the first thing that comes to mind. If we continue working with testing and do everything more DevOps-ish, test everything really quick, test it in production. If we see something funny, then let's roll it back. The more signal that we have, the more things that we can break, the faster that we can actually look into issues.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, we also, it's just, we have to be super careful. And I say that as talking about, I'm not sure how many of you have seen this failing test issue around the release branch tests, but this is something that I worked on a decent chunk of Friday with Tim and Jeff and Liggett around something that we didn't expect to make a change that cascaded into the entire system, and CI signal didn't come anywhere close to being clean until mid Saturday or something, right? So if you want to see an issue like that, you can check that out. So it's like, we just have to be aware that changes to the system can potentially be devastating. And this was down to essentially the way Git describe works and regexes, of course. So I'm not. This is tricky. There's so many things that are involved in the system that aren't in any way isolated. It kind of flows through each gate, and I don't know if we have a good answer for that right now.
This goes back to Gwen's discussion of communication, understanding who's your stakeholders and being interlocked.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this one, needs more cooking time, more steeping, percolating.
Yeah, it's got to simmer a little. You wanna jump to the next one, or do we want to call it done? Do you want to? I mean, I'm happy to stay and do more stuff. I want to.
I can read through the next ones because I think those are basically basic action items.
Would it make sense to have Jorge read through them and ask us questions as the incoming lead?
You are correct.
Ooh, fancy.
I have stage fright. Well, let me give it a try.
Get used to
it. Okay, so let me see. Work towards adding real end-to-end tests. Can I get my 117? Can I get a little bit more context on that one, please?
Yes, let me find the issue for you and link it here. And also, it was it got put on the backlog during 117. This is something that we can't do personally, but we can ask people to put them back. Oh, I can't.
Sorry for interrupting. Really quick question: is it by any chance the issue that you're talking about, the one about running end-to-end tests on non-synthetic clusters?
Yes, that one.
Okay. So in that case, I got that one, and okay. So work towards. Thank you, Anonymous Wolf, for changing the title. So next one, improving meeting times for non-US time zones. Sounds good, and actually started the conversation already with the 118 leads. So hopefully more things to come in there. CI Signal weekly reports. Should we keep doing them? If anyone is interested on hearing a long ramble on this one. But Alina and I were discussing this, and we were hoping to bring it up with Nicolaus and the rest of the release team. And by the end of the day, there should be an issue with more details on this. So next one, no need to add a scalability liaison role to the release team. Steven, kind of makes sense. Communication was good. Need more discussion between lead roles who use spreadsheets to work together on ways to improve tools, automation. I love this one. Thank you very much for adding it. Tune the role, handbooks, and process synchronization. Also, if someone has anything to say, please just interrupt me. So tune the role, handbooks, and process synchronization points to shift more earlier. Release work should not start at 4 p.m. Pacific, but more finish them.
Let's clarify that this is specifically for the release cut, because that's what it sounds like.
Okay, awesome. I was making that assumption, but thank you for that. Fresh, I was gonna say noodle. Fresh noodle for time for the week release team meeting. Sweet.
I'd be okay with that too.
Moving on to the next one. Determine what communications. CI signal report comment from Alina above can be informal, asynchronous, and which need to be more formal reports, and what frequency. I think this got a little bit rumbled between the two of us, but related to the previous comment on CI signal reports. So moving on to the next one. Aim for a more efficient retro meeting, time box discussion. Pragmatically allow it to continue or agree to move it on to an issue. Retro documentation needs to be updated to reflect this.
I have opinions here.
Please throw them out.
So I mean, we did a lot of discussion post retro. We had several retros of retros. I spoke to some of the people who were on the retro as bystanders. I had a long conversation with Gwen about the stuff as well. And then by that time, I was going to have a conversation with Tim, and Tim was like, I'm sending one more email and I'm out of the door. So I think overall, there is kind of a balance that we have to strike in these. My personal feeling is that when we talk about something, this doc is essentially what the emeritus advisor will be using and what the people who are tagged on the doc will be using to scrape together notes to understand what they need to do next to improve. Right? I think that we owe it to them to make sure that those notes are as complete as possible. Right? So I have a bit of a problem with cutting off a topic too quickly. Like there is a loose, there's kind of like a loose, all right, we have X amount of minutes for this topic and then we move on. But I think that it's important that we not context switch from topic to topic. Like I noticed in the first session, we were moving things down lower in the doc to talk about later. And I'm like, we're talking about it now. We should just finish talking about it and then like be done with it. Give people enough context to write that issue if they need to. But in addition to that, there was a feeling. There's a feeling that we were not able to. So to make the retro more efficient, we're talking about spending less time on the individual items for the retro. But at the same time, there is another issue about making sure that shadows have the space to provide feedback during the retro, right? And sometimes that may mean the more senior people like myself shutting up, right? Saying less words to give them that space. And this kind of led to the issue that that was opened around having a separate shadow retrospective, right? Gwen and I were talking about this, and I was like, I personally hate this idea. Hate is a very, very strong word. Don't mean hate. I think that having a separate retrospective divides the audiences, right? the whole idea of the retrospective is to be open and inclusive and allow people to share their opinions. And that's one of the many reasons that we hold it at the community meeting, so everyone can feel like they can get involved in this, right? We need to do separate work to make sure that shadows feel like they can provide that voice during these meetings, right? And that should be happening throughout the cycle. I think that that's something that, you know, as I think Gwen, you already put this on the issue, but that's something that we could have. So the emeritus advisors and I were talking about having more frequent touch points throughout the cycle with shadows to make sure that they feel like they have the tools that they need to succeed, right?
I think a lot of the solution for this is, for that, the shadow issue is similar to how we communicate about meeting times. Make it possible for people to communicate not just personally, not just by opening their mouths, but also by writing things down somewhere or responding to a poll or asking somebody in private. Different people communicate in different ways. We want to make sure to have different venues for people to be heard. Overall, my comment about the retro being more efficient was a matter of degree and a matter of takes up the most speaking time. Certain people should naturally take up more speaking time than others because they were role leads for the thing we are discussing. But it is, when we get to the point of saying the same things 4 or 5 different ways, or coming up with 4 or 5 different solutions or ideas, that's when we should put it in an issue and let others who may not be at the meeting too read it.
So this was kind of the idea behind Claire, Lockie and I were chatting about this, and we're like, okay, well, who should run the retro? And we were saying like, okay, well, maybe the emeritus advisor puts together a set of candidates or something, and then you're like, wait, maybe the emeritus advisor should be the retro moderator at first resort because they have a lot of the context that they're talking about in these issues. So when it looks like we're about to say the same thing 4 times, they're like, wait, we know about this issue, it's documented already, like let's move on to the next one. I think they would have the appropriate context to do that. And something of that form is already being documented for the update of the EA handbook. I think Claire has done a second revision of it, so I'm going to do another pass on that and get that merged in. To your previous point about people communicating different ways, and that's a super, super good point. What if we allowed people to also submit some sort of anonymous feedback as items for the RetroDoc, right? If there's something you feel like you could have fixed and you don't want to put your name on it, you can submit it to Emeritus Advisor or something like that, and that will get on the doc. And you don't have to speak at it if you don't want to, but just make sure that we have enough context on the meeting to run with it if you don't want to speak up during the meeting.
You should be able to just add it anonymously anyway.
If you go through history, if you're logged in and you go through history in a Google Doc, you can figure out who wrote what. But if they don't want to leave their name on it.
Sure. Yeah. The other thing that'd be cool is also just to file an issue and then link that with your comment.
Yes.
And that's actually happened today already. Some of our discussion is already open issues today.
Yay! It was happening during the part 1 of the retro too. So I'm loving seeing that, because often this is a someone comes by later and kind of scrapes all the notes and does stuff with it. I love seeing that proactive those proactive moves. Yeah, I forgot what I was going to say. Never mind.
A couple quick comments on all of that. Also, throwing them out there for I want to get different point of views. So for the people on the point of people communicate differently and all that, and also related to the conversation that we had a little earlier ago about bringing code slush back or something of the sort. One of the things that I was thinking that it might be really useful is for a part, advertise the retrospective a little bit more, so that advertise the retrospective at least once every week, once every 2 weeks. Make sure that people get in there. The idea of allowing people to give private feedback, it might be really useful, especially if we contact shadows or people of the sort who are not really accustomed to the community. Like, okay, I have this idea, I have this trouble, but I have this problem, but can you please help me communicate it to the rest of the to the rest of the community? The other big thing that we should really strive for, I think, is having the retrospective read like a story. For example, if you try to go back to the retrospective for 1.14, code slush, it's mentioned once, and there is just we get rid of code slush. There is very little context. You actually have to go through a couple issues through the 1.13 retrospective to get a little bit of a better idea. But having issues and getting the why instead of the what we're gonna do, that will also be really cool and awesome. Also, really quick comment on the other thing for the shadow retrospective thing that I threw out there. So the big idea, and I should probably work on the wording, is not to separate the shadows from the leads, just to the shadow retrospective. The thing that I was thinking is to have one retrospective just be about the shadowing experience. For example, a lot of the issues that we have discussed in the previous two releases are CI, how to manage docs, how to merge those things, but kind of give another platform for people to say, I was doing release notes and I have no idea what was happening. Like, who should I ask? Who should I contact? What documents should I read? And just have just kind of gather like a lot of information that might be useful for shadows to learn how to do their role, how to be part of the community, and also to gather a lot of information for leads. Because besides being able to do your job for being a lead, you also have to be relatively good at mentoring others. And mentoring and doing your job are not necessarily the same skills, the same skill set.
So this is kind of what we were trying to allude to with like these touch point meetings, doing more touch point meetings throughout the cycle, having and that would be more team feels. What I'm wondering if it's valuable to do is try to isolate the items that are on the retrospective doc, because like between this and the current way we run it, do we need to change the way we run it? Does it need to be a longer meeting? The initial one needs to be a longer meeting. Like if we're saying we're going to more widely publicize it, I guess, like I imagine there's going to be an influx of more things that will pop up on this doc. So we need to be cautious of that too, because we're already feeling like we don't have the space to do it, and we're breaking it up into multiple meetings, so we have to be cautious about the way we move. I think that if we were to try and separate out what is a team issue, right, or what is a section issue, what is something that is contained within the release team, and use the time that we have for these touch point meetings to focus on that stuff, and trying to figure out what is something that is a broad retrospective item for the community, right? It's process improvement. It's a process improvement. Yeah. If we focused on those during the retrospective, I think that we would move faster. Yeah, exactly the way you phrased it, Tim. You make good words.
So on that note, anyone has any other comments on this topic?
I actually have the same question for you, since you'll be taking on the mantle. What do you think of that idea?
In general, I like the division. the worry that I will, the only worry that I will have, and maybe separating the topics, it's something that we can have that we should definitely have multiple opinions for what topics do we discuss, what topic do we just mention, and make sure to open up an issue is community-wide projects, or even release not projects, issues, or even release team issues should definitely be discussed during retrospective. But some other things that might be a little bit more team centered might be useful to discuss every now and then, because for someone, maybe if we get really good at division, maybe the other teams are not aware that there's this certain bit of information, or this certain type of process that they can use, they can rely, or they can acquire for some other reason.
So yeah, so what was going on in my head is, like, if we did a separate retrospective, what if we did that team-centric one first, right? And then led into the community-wide one. Like, both of them are still recorded, but the team-centric one would happen maybe on the release team meeting slot or the SIG release slot, right? And then we would move to the community slot to round out the community-wide topics. I'm just throwing things at the board right now.
That actually sounds really good to me.
So I'll comment what's in my head on that issue. That I kind of got wrapped up with the branch failure stuff, but I'm going through the issues and PRs and stuff like that. So I'll comment on that.
Absolutely, and thank you very much. So with that, any more comments? Going once, twice.
Ooh, I have one more comment.
Please.
The mascot is in process, and I will be able to show you all and share it soon.
That's pretty chill.
That is fantastic.
Super
and and I guess on to the last bullet point: implement release style, release branch automation, and branch fast forwarding in the docs repo. I believe this was already discussed, but also nice to see Jim being mentioned. Hi, Jim, if you're still there, I miss you.
I miss you too, George, every day.
Does anyone have any other questions, comments for that one? Sounds good. So at least on my end, it looks like we got everything covered, and I already see some action items being thrown out there, which is awesome.
So yeah, so I would say that the next step is I owe Lockie some stuff. Lockie owes me some stuff. I think one of the things is collating the items in the retrospective doc and turning this into a set of AIs on GitHub, and then we can start linking that stuff back. But yeah, we've got. I would like to say we have time as we're going into, we're getting ready to go into holiday season, and then also, George, do you have any ideas of when you would start this? I know it's early. It's early, so.
Oh, I got everything planned.
I love it.
At least the proposed time was to start 118 on January 6th.
Mm-hmm.
The whole Tuesday, the whole release on Tuesday thing, that's definitely an idea I really like. And I don't have the date memorized, but I actually have I did have a proposed calendar. I'll send it out at some point.
So just to clarify, and I'll clarify in your review as well, Gwen, the proposal was not to do the release on Tuesday. The proposal was to do the release not on Monday. That's it, right? So like you're free to choose. Yeah, you're free to choose the day. Just make sure that if it's Monday, then people shift their schedule. People start trending towards the weekend. So to prep for it. So yeah, it's just not Monday was the only thing I was suggesting.
Sure, that makes sense.
Awesome.
And I can help you with the retrospective checklist for.
I want to make sure that so I'm thinking right now who has to do stuff. I might start expanding the rights on the repo so that more people have write access. But Tim will talk about that because right now the person who creates the issue is the person who gets to edit the description. That's why I want Lockie to open it. So if we change what so by default, if you open an issue, you are yeah, right, or a repo admin or someone with, I don't know if it's write or admin access. I think it's write access, has access to edit the issue. Right. So I just want to make sure like I can edit it just fine, but you know, if I create the issue or you create the issue, Lockie won't necessarily be able to touch it. Right. So I want.
Okay, maybe we're talking about something else. We don't have to discuss this right now.
What are we talking about?
I'm really confused.
You were talking about the retro items, right?
Yeah. We had like an umbrella retro ticket.
So we
had throughout 117 from 116. I'm confused, why I wouldn't be the one to open it. What Lockie has to do with the 116 retro items, and
no, we're not talking about we're talking about the 117 retro items.
Yes.
So I'm saying Lockie should open the issue for the 117 ones because he's going to be the one burning them down throughout the 118 cycle.
The specific implementation detail I think that we're not stating there is that we often do a bullet list in the description of the issue. So for somebody to go in and edit the description and mark the checkbox in that bullet list as complete, they have to have edit pros, which means they have to have opened it, not somebody else opened it.
I know that. I think what I'm confused about is why it would be Lockie to do it.
Lockie is the emeritus advisor for
117 at all.
He's the emeritus advisor for 118. So he's going to be, so we're, okay. So I think the additional context that you're missing is the emeritus advisors and I had a chat last 2 Fridays ago at this point about the expanding the purview of the emeritus advisor role to include making sure that we actually do the things that we said we were going to do in the previous retro.
Okay. Yes. Right. I am not convinced that opening this. Yes. Anyway, when I said I will assist in opening this issue, I meant that I will add the things from my perspective of 117 that should be there because it doesn't seem right because Lockie wasn't around for this cycle.
He doesn't have to be on for the cycle. What I'm saying is like when we get to the end of the
next. I
next.
see what you're saying. I'm just like for the content, I can assist with the content.
Oh, for sure. Well, it goes back to can you edit the content? Will you have access to edit the content?
Which is why also just discuss it with him. There's Slack, there's meetings, there's Zooms, there's Google Docs. As long as he eventually puts the stuff in the issue, it'll be fine.
Okay.
Right. And yes, I have edit access. Oops. Oh yeah.
For now. For now.
One more thing before we go. Happy birthday, Veronica.
Thank you. Again, it was the same. Like I couldn't unmute.
All right. Well, thank you all for hanging out for extra time to make sure that we got through this. I actually really appreciate not having to punt any additional items to yet another meeting as we move into the holidays. Yeah, awesome job. What's left of the team now for 117? Thank you for all that you do and just helping us out, not just on the team, but being good humans. Seriously, Gwen, you've done a phenomenal job over the cycle and yeah, things. Catch y'all on the flip side.
Thanks everyone so much for your support and your work and your help. It's been real.
Thank you.
Here.
Awesome.